Good evening, everyone, and welcome. After a long hiatus, we are resuming our studying. Very briefly, we have just concluded chapter 26. We're about to begin 27. Chapter 26, the Rebbe is speaking about joy, how essential joy for life is. This chapter and the next one, the Rabbi will continue speaking about joy, that nothing is as valuable in our life other than joy. In chapter 26, those of us who remember, the Rebbe was speaking about a person who gets into depression or melancholy based on their misbehaving. They sin, they do not respect others properly, they don't do what's right, and then when they remember their behavior, it makes them sad. And the motto of last chapter is, in my opinion, as I think the Rebbe shared to one of the helpers once, and I shared it with you many times, you cannot atone for one sin with another sin. If someone has a deficiency, if someone has a sin, it's impossible to atone with sadness or with depression, because you're adding salt to an open wound. You are the person committing another sin, and that is impossible to atone for a sin we did. How do we deal with misbehaving? So in last chapter, we dealt with two types, two kinds, and mostly the rabbi said that it has to be done in specific given times. In the evening, I shared with you before Rosh Chodesh, before once a month, once a week, before Shabbat, but definitely not something to be bothered with in our day-to-day life. Either because when we study and pray, or when we go about our day-to-day life. In today's chapter, the Rebbe is going to deal with another dimension of a drive by the evil inclination to make us sad. And that is, chapter 26 is talking about past misdeeds. My past, I broke relationship. I did not keep the mitzvot. I made bad choices, is what chases me and makes me be sad. Chapter 27, the Rabbi is going to concentrate on the present. Right now, I'm unable to concentrate when I pray. Right now, I don't make good choices. By the way, and I shared again before, anything we study, the Rabbi is using and talking about holy people who study and pray, and that's what bothers them. But it applies also in the physical, mundane life, where we make bad choices. We miss opportunities, and the Torah teaches us not to get, and the Tanya wants to deal with the fact that it drives us to be depressed. Is that mankind?
Yeah,
So
somebody
I'll
was
wait.
in handicap and we didn't have space, so I had to maneuver.
So we will wait for him, okay?
He's coming in. Thank you.
All right. So I want to give you a short summary of what each chapter is going to be dealing with. There will be three main points the rabbi is going to make. The first point is, anytime we get depressed or bitter about any situation, we fight back with joy. Simcha has many, many qualities. It mends, it connects people. Simcha reveals the essence of a person. Simcha is good for long life. Studies shows that people who are happy have a much less time visiting doctors. Here, the rabbi is going to say that the only way to fight my bad choices in the present is joy, happiness. Number two, the rabbi is going to share with us that sometimes we are depressed or we get sad about unsuccessful achievements, about failing in a spiritual test, because we do not acknowledge or recognize where we are. We expect from ourselves a lot more than where we are, And therefore, sometimes it makes us sad. But if we were to realize, to acknowledge that we are human beings, finite creatures who have faults, we are unable to be perfect, it will make life a lot easier. And finally, the third point the Rabbi is going to make is, never, never dream of a day where you are going to retire and relax. We were created to toil, and therefore the evil inclination will continuously challenge us. So the day that we want to relax and be able to enjoy studying and enjoy prayer without any hurdles, without any difficulties, will never happen. Temporarily, we might be able to have it an easy day, but the challenge is going to come the next day. It will never change because that's the way God created us. These are the 3 points the Rabbi is going to make in this chapter. As we begin the chapter, where is Ali? I miss Ali. There was a rabbi who was approached by a member, and the member turned to him and he says, Rabbi, I have a problem. Before he had an opportunity to continue, the rabbi stopped him and said, some people see life as a problem. Some people see it as a challenge, and some people see it as an opportunity. In other words, for someone to have a problem, it's all about their attitude, because a problem can be a challenge that helps us grow, and it turned into an opportunity. And as soon as a person, that's what makes optimistic person be able to view life and live a much better life. There is no place for judging anybody. It's just an attitude. In other words, Kabbalah, Hasidic teaching tell us that the events that fall upon us, whatever our lot is, we have no control over. We can't change it. But our attitude, our response to it, we have a full control. So when things did not work out, it's nothing to do with me, but it's also not a reason to be depressed, because my attitude, my response to the event is in total control. So I can see it as an opportunity. I'm sure you heard about the difference between optimistic and pessimist, about two people who were sent to from a shoe company to try and open up a new market in another country. And both of them, as salesmen, sent back a letter. One of them sent back a letter to his boss saying, forget about this market because no one wears shoes. Everybody walks barefoot. So it's going to be a waste of your money to advertise the special shoes we sell. The other one sent a letter saying what? Go and open up a few more factories, because the factory we have right now is not sufficient. Nobody is wearing shoes. We can sell shoes for the rest of our life and never cover all the needs. It all depends on the attitude. And this is what the rabbi is going to speak about. The rabbi is dealing with very holy spiritual people who are really bothered by not having a perfect prayer, who are really bothered by not being able to study Torah as much as they want. I'm not sure that I can qualify for that level, but definitely, as I said, when I was preparing it, I can tell you for sure that it applies even in our day-to-day life in material events or dealings. We have expectations. Sometimes we prepare, we work very hard, and we put all the efforts, and at the end, it doesn't work out the way we wanted. And some people get very upset, get depressed, get bitter. And this is what the Rebbe is addressing. So it's another dimension of the evil inclination fighting the human being by trying to put us down, to juice out, to remove our energy by making us upset. So the first part of the chapter, as I said before, is that the best cure for all ailments is joy. You fight the evil with joy. Joy is cure number one for everything, including the present difficulties. Let's start chapter 27. What did you want to say?
She will never have a problem.
Why?
She's always joyous.
She's always joyous.
Always.
She's a role model.
Yeah.
Chapter 27. I'm reading on page 362. In the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe stated that sadness hinders one's service of God in general and his battle with the Yetzer Hara, with the evil inclination in particular. He therefore discussed means of overcoming sadness caused by material concerns or by anxiety over one's sins. As I said, chapter 26 is all about the past misdeeds. In this chapter and the next, he will discuss another type of melancholy that caused by concern over one's sinful thoughts and desires in their presence. This category itself may be further subdivided into two. One, where these thoughts occur while one is occupied with material affairs, and two, where these thoughts disturb his service of God in Torah study, prayers, and the like. So there are two subcategories within the sadness. One is while he's busy with his business dealing, he's a store clerk, he is an attorney, he's a cab driver, he's an Uber driver, and all the thoughts that enter his mind are not proper. Or, second part, while he's studying Torah or praying, instead of concentrating and studying properly, his mind is wandering elsewhere. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe discusses the first situation. He states that not only are these thoughts no cause for sadness, but on the contrary, they ought to give rise to joy. The fact that we are getting disturbed, the fact that our mind is wandering, the fact that we are unable to concentrate and serve God properly, the Rebbe is going to convert it into an opportunity, not a problem. An opportunity to reconnect to God. When it comes with challenges, it's a far greater way of serving God. And the rabbi is going to use examples from food, where we have two types of food. You have in general, the food is divided into two categories: sweet and spicy. Which one is better, sweet or spicy? Well, at the end of the chapter, we'll discover which one we favor. Here is the Rebbe's words. If, however, his sadness does not stem from anxiety over sins that he has committed in the past, but from the fact that the sinful thoughts and desires enter his mind, then, says the Rebbe, if these thoughts occur to him, not during his service of God, but while he is occupied with his own affairs and with mundane matters and the like, he should, on the contrary, be happy in his lot. For although these sinful thoughts enter his mind, he averts his attention from them. In other words, if they come to him while he's busy doing whatever he's supposed to be doing, the fact that he is thinking evil thoughts, the fact that his mind is wandering in the wrong places, the wrong spaces, should bring joy. Because he says to himself, the evil is giving me an opportunity to serve God. No one can serve God properly unless they're being challenged. And it is clear that here we are speaking of one who does not willfully dwell in sinful thoughts, for if he does so, he is a sinner. And the previous chapter has already dealt with sadness arising from sins. We're not dealing with someone who is willingly start thinking about how to cheat and how to lie and how to steal. This is a sinful person. For that we dealt with in chapter 26. Chapter 27 is if the mind is wandering against his will. And he's wondering, he's bothered why his mind is there. And he's trying to fight it. That's a source for joy because God is giving him an opportunity to rise above, to serve God. By averting his mind from sinful thoughts, he fulfills the injunction, you should not follow after your heart and after your eyes, by which you go astray. Anybody is familiar with verse? Where do we say that? In the Shema prayer, V'lo yisosuru, do not wander, acharei levavchem, after your heart, v'acharei einechem, and after your eyes, asher atem zoinim achareihem, that you are wandering after them. The question is, God is already specifying clearly that we are wandering. In other words, the fact is that we are not pure with our heart. How is it possible? After all, maybe I'm not wandering. How can God tells us, do not follow your heart and your eyes, which I'm sure you are wandering after. Maybe I'm not. And the answer is the only people who do not wander after their heart and eyes are righteous people, tzaddikim, a tzaddik who had killed his evil, as we discussed in the previous chapters. A Beinoni, this book is for Beinonim, is a person whose heart is wandering and therefore desires evil thoughts. And those thoughts keep entering his heart all the time. The goal is to not willingly continue on with those thoughts. Only when sinful thoughts enter one's mind can he fulfill this commandment. In other words, whenever I drive away, I throw away negative thoughts from my heart, from my mind, I fulfill a mitzvah. And it's a mitzvah we recite 4 or 5 times a day, every time we say the Shema. For the intention of the verse is not that one be at a level where such thoughts would not occur to him. This is the level of tzaddikim, who have eradicated all evil from their hearts. Surely then this service is not addressed to tzaddikim. The verse refers rather to one who does have such thoughts, and he is commanded to banish them. As the Alter Rebbe continues, the Rabbi is going to continue. So when God is telling us, do not wander, do not follow your heart's desire by watching or by hearing or by seeing, because your heart wanders, God is stating the fact that we all have our hearts that desires evil. And there is no way to stop it unless we are a tzaddik who has no evil thoughts. The goal is to serve God by stopping it, by fighting it. The above verse surely does not speak of tzaddikim, says the Rebbe, referring to them, God forbid, as going astray, but of Beinonim, like himself, in whose mind there do enter erotic thoughts, whether of an innocent nature or otherwise. And when he averts his mind from them, he fulfills this injunction. Our sages have said, one who passively refrains from sin, he is rewarded as though he had actively performed a mitzvah. The sages tell us that someone can be sitting at home and doing nothing and fulfill a great mitzvah. How? He had someone call them up and says, let's go and break into a bank. Let's commit a sin. And this person says, I don't want to. Why? He's afraid of the police. Or he's afraid of God. Then by staying home and not following his heart's desire or his friend's heart's desire, he had fulfilled the mitzvah and is rewarded as if he did a great deed. So therefore, you might think that a tzaddik is someone who is studying Torah all day, wear a black hat, and is always shaking like that. But in essence, in truth, some people who had desires for evil, which are far greater than the norm, and not because they are religious, because they are not non-religious, and they are able to overcome those urges, they are far greater. They get much rewarded to a far greater degree, and they bring pleasure to God to a far greater level than someone who studied Torah all day and he has nothing else. I don't want to get into details, but this is a very impactful story. There was a man who had a great desire to sin, and he asked the rabbi, his rabbi, a Chabad rabbi, and he says to the rabbi that his desire is so strong that no one can stop him. And he went to many rabbis, and they tried to convince him how grave the sin is, it will affect his future, and it didn't work. And that rabbi, the Chabad rabbi, told them, go to the Rebbe, travel to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and share with him your desire, you challenge. And when he said to the Rebbe, he says he thought the Rebbe is going to tell him how grave the sin and how evil you can get into, you'll never get out. Instead, the Rebbe turned to him and says, I'm jealous of you. I'm jealous of you. It's recorded, you can watch it. And the man was shocked. And the Rebbe says that anytime God gives a challenge to a person, he always gives him a ladder to climb out of that dungeon. A challenge is a dungeon. God throws you into a dungeon. But he also gives you a ladder and the opportunity to climb out. No one will get a deeper dungeon unless they have a much taller ladder. It's impossible. And therefore, the Rebbe says to him, because you're facing challenges, the urges that you have, I don't. It means that you have a much greater ladder that can reach much farther into God. So therefore, instead, in other words, what the Rebbe did, and it affected many people since this kind of attitude the Rebbe shared with the men. It's not bad. It's not something to regret. It's not something that I am not as good as everybody else, but rather quite the opposite. God is giving me an opportunity to bond with God in such a degree that nobody else or no one else around me is able to. And therefore, I take this opportunity and cherish it, and I appreciate it. And by staying away from that behavior, I am getting close to God. And that's what the rabbi is saying, that somebody is able to sit down and do nothing, and yet they are serving God to a far greater degree because they refrain from sin. Says the Rebbe. So this is the first point that the Rebbe is going to conclude now before we move to the second point. The best way to take a challenge or difficulty that drives me down, that I don't want to talk to people, I want to be left alone, I don't want to do anything, it is to know that God is giving me a great opportunity to connect, and therefore I drive away those thoughts, and I drive away and I stay from sin, and I realize that sadness is the source that was going to get me in trouble, and I am reconnecting to God. And therefore, conversely, says the Rebbe, he should rejoice in his compliance with the injunction, just as he does when performing an actual positive precept. So if I have an opportunity to sin and I stay away, I should be extremely joyous because God gave me an opportunity to connect to Him to a far greater degree. So if I don't steal and I don't have the desire to steal, there's nothing on my record. Imagine someone who is habitually a thief. What do you call it? Kleptomania? People who like to grab stuff? Kleptomania.
Kleptomania is a rare but serious psychological disorder.
There you go.
That's what it is. They're helping you out.
Okay, so someone who has an urge is going through the aisles and he sees a Louis Vuitton handbag, he or she, and they really want it, and they can't afford the $750. They can have it for free. They can stick it into the bag or in the pockets, and they say, "I'm not going to do it because God said so." They have bonded with God to such a great degree that many people who at the same time sit and study Torah are unable to. So the Rebbe takes a challenge or a problem and makes it an opportunity, makes from it a bridge that connects us to God to a far greater degree. Thus, now the rabbi is going to move on to the next step. The next step is part of the reason we get upset that we're getting challenged is because we do not recognize our space where we belong. And by expecting high expectations, I think I'm a righteous man. Why should I be challenged with such behavior is the cause of sadness. But if I acknowledge or I recognize where my space is, I realize that therefore I shouldn't have too much high expectations, and therefore we do not get disappointed. High expectations lead to disappointments. Thus, and this is the way the Rabbi explains, not only should the occurrence of these thoughts not grieve him, but it ought to bring him joy, for only thereby is he able to fulfill this commandment. In other words, I told you, God says, thou shalt not steal. Someone who sits and studies Torah and he lives in Beis HaMedrash or he lives in yeshiva does not have many opportunities to steal. But someone who goes shopping all day and has the urge because they want to show off with a nice handbag and they refrain, they are actually fulfill the mitzvah of thou shalt not steal. On the contrary, says the Rebbe, such sadness, to be sad that I have urges to misbehave. How come I have those urges and other people don't? Such sadness is due to conceit, for he does not know his place, and that is why he is distressed, because he has not attained the level of a tzaddik. He expects to be a tzaddik. He's upset he's not a tzaddik, not realizing that desire to do evil is planted and engineered in our DNA. Only a tzaddik is lacking a part of what humanity is all about, which is the godly soul, the animal soul, and therefore they have no desire to sin. To whom such foolish thoughts surely do not occur. A tzaddik will never be depressed because he never has those evil thoughts. For were he to recognize his station, that he is very far from the rank of a tzaddik, and would that he be a Beinoni, and not a rasha, and not evil for even a single moment throughout his life, that is, this is what he should be striving for at present, rather than vainly desiring to be a tzaddik. Let him think that it's best if he is a Beinoni, 1 hour, a little bit. A Beinoni is someone who, in his action, is able to control himself. But his very essence, his DNA, has a evil. And therefore, he has a very strong desire to sin. He has a desire to cheat, to lie, to his mind to wander while he's praying. Is this because he's a bad person? Quite the opposite. It's because God gives him an opportunity to connect. If he is disappointed, it's because he is not recognizing where he belongs. He's not in the category of a tzaddik, but a Beinoni, and a Beinoni does possess evil desires. Then surely this is the due measure of the Beinonim and the task, to subdue the evil impulse and the thought that rises from the heart to the mind, and to completely avert his mind from it, repulsing it as it were with both hands, as explains above in chapter 12. Says the Rebbe, if someone is distraught, if someone is not happy because he has a desire to cheat, he has a desire to steal, and he's saying to himself, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have a good desire like everybody else? Says Rebbe, it's because he has a very high expectation, thinking to himself he's a tzaddik. Because if he knows his place as a Beinoni, he should know he has an evil inclination. And every Beinoni, he wishes he will be like a Beinoni, not a Rasha. Every Beinoni has those desires. They want to cheat, they want to lie, they want to do whatever evil people do, they want to. The distinction between a Beinoni and a Rasha is that a Beinoni controls his desires. And that's why God says, do not wander after your heart and eyes, that you are wandering. We are wandering, all of us, unless you're a tzaddik. And therefore, no room for disappointment, but a room for joy that God is giving us another opportunity to serve him. Now the Rabbi is going to continue on. I told you the third part the Rabbi wants to talk about is that we will never have no evil desire. We fight. We serve God every moment of our life, each one their category, their area, and it will never stop. The Alter Rebbe explained there that the evil in the soul of the Beinoni remains vigorous. His task is to prevent it from expressing itself in thought, speech, and action. Thus, he has no control over the occurrence of evil thoughts in his mind, but only over his acceptance or rejection of these thoughts. We study in chapter 12 and on that the Benoni possesses very hot, burning heart for evil, for sin. Each one according to their level. The goal, or what distinguishes a Benoni from a Rasha, is that they are not allowing those desires to spill out into thought, speech, and action, which are the garments. As long as I can control. So if I pray or I study Torah and my mind starts wandering in the wrong places, as soon as I wake up, as soon as I realize it's wrong, I say to myself, stop, that's not right. What I did was I served God. I get rewarded for serving God. So there is no room for disappointment. There is no room for sadness because the thoughts come from the evil which exist very much in my life. The same is about, as I said, someone who also desires to cheat or to steal, and they say, why God created me? Why did he hardwire me with that desire? How come I am different than anybody else? The answer is you may not be different than anybody else. The only difference is whether you are going to allow those desires to control you, or you're going to say, it's not for me. I don't want to do that. There was a Chassid who wanted to demonstrate this point, not in a scene, but in just a behavior. And one day, he sat down with his students. It was a spiritual leader, a mashpia. He sat down on a table and they served herring. Anybody knows what herring is?
Yeah. Good.
I hate herring, but I know everybody loves herring. So herring is a delicious delicacy. And everybody was looking at the herring. And it's kosher. And you make a blessing. So you can serve God. And it's Shabbos. You have a mitzvah to enjoy. And the rabbi looked at the herring and said, you know, fish, why should you control me? I don't want you to let you control me. And he pushed away the plate. And he did not touch the plate for the rest of the remaining of the farbrengen of the meeting. For some of us, we need to realize that the fish can control us. If we are serving the urges, now this is not about sin, but in general, the idea of urge. If I'm able to learn that in my life, I need to be the boss, and I'm not allowed to, and I have a story for that too, and I'm not allowed to have someone else to control me, then the fact that in my heart there is a evil that wants me to sin will not take away from my control of that evil and saying to it, no, I'm not. And by doing so, God is very pleased. If God is very pleased, I serve God, just like studying Torah. There was this is a very famous Hasidic story of a Rebbe. I think it's the Mezritche Magid or the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe. He had a Chassid who told him that he has no control over his urges. He cannot control himself. How can he learn to control himself? And the Rebbe said to him, travel to Odessa. In Odessa, I have a Chassid. And tell that Chassid that you want to spend a few days. He will teach you how to control yourself. And the Chassid traveled to Odessa, found the man, and asked if he can stay a couple of days. He's a Chassid of the Rebbe. And the Chassid said, sure. Now he's trying to see how he can gain this knowledge about controlling his urges. And he sees that Chassid is a very simple man, gets up in the morning, goes, prays, eats breakfast, goes to work, comes home, pray in the evening service, study Torah with his children, the little that he knew, have a nice conversation with his wife and goes to bed. Nothing unusual, nothing special. One day, it took like that 3-4 days. 4 days later, he saw there was a window. There was a window that brought the sunlight in, but it was very high. So he was curious to see what can he see over the window. So he took the table, he put a chair on top of the table, and he went up there. When he looked the window, it was the backyard of the neighbors. And what he saw is a forbidden sin. You know, a Jew is forbidden from looking at what was going on there. So it wasn't. So he was shaken, and when the Chassid came home, he turned to the Chassid and says, "How is it possible you live next door to someone who is behaving, his conduct does not befit even a non-Jew, let alone someone who follows the Torah?" And the Chassid turned to him and says, "Look at the difference between you and me. I live in this house for 20 years. I never bothered to look over the window and see what's going on in my neighbor. And you are here only 3.5 days and you're already climbing the wall to check." We need to understand that we have the control. What's going on next door has nothing to do with me. The question is, can I control myself and concentrate on what's right in my life? If we do so, this is what the Rebbe is saying. The fact that my heart is burning in the desire to sin and misbehave, that's the way God created us, because God gives us an opportunity to serve God. As long as I realize that and I say, stay put, control yourself, don't allow those desires or those thoughts to linger, I'm serving God. I hope I made myself the point clear. Now the Rabbi is going to talk about the point that it will never stop. If you think many years back, many years back, when I was a young rabbi, a couple approached me in the 90s. He was high 90s, she was in the high 90s. They both widowed, and she was on a wheelchair. And they fell in love with each other. They met at a senior citizen place, and they wanted to get married. By Jewish law, a male and female should not live under the same roof unless they're married. So they approached me that they want me to marry them. So if I check that both are Jewish and are willing to follow Jewish law under the marriage, I would say I'll be happy to. But they had one problem. The problem is she was in a wheelchair and she was unable to go into a mikveh. The night of the wedding, though, before the wife to be needs to emerge in a mikveh. So they turned to me. I'm going to speak vaguely, not the language that was spoken to me, but they said that she's already in her 90s, so perhaps we can skip the mikveh. So I said, I don't know what to answer. I thought to myself, anyway, just while I was thinking what to do, I traveled to Israel to a wedding that one of my sisters, young sisters, and because I rented a car, my father asked me to bring the rabbi of the village of Kfar Chabad, don't drive. So whenever he attends weddings, he passed away, his son now is a rabbi. Whenever he attends weddings, he's told what hour, and he has to be there on time because there are a few weddings he performs, and somebody has to go and pick him up and then take him back. So my father said to me, "Can you go and pick him up?" So I said, "For sure, because I have an opportunity to speak to him." So this was the question I asked him while we're driving. And he turned to me and he says, "Do you think that someone in his 90s have less evil inclination than someone who is 20? And he continued on, he says, the evil desires exist with the 90s, the same as they were in the age of 20s. The answer to my question is that there is no way that we can skip the mikveh. But we needed to find a handicapped mikveh, and the only one was available was in Boca Raton. At the time, we were the only mikveh on the West Coast. We just finished the mikveh, and then Orlando had a mikveh that was not capable for. They were supposed to lower the person with the chair into the mikveh. And Boca Raton Synagogue, it's not a Chabad, but Orthodox place, had such a facility. Back to our discussion. evil inclination is burning in our heart, no matter what age we are. Back to our discussion here. The rabbi is going to say that our challenges continue on. Maybe when you're a child, it's about ice cream. When you get married, it's about a large screen TV. When you are marrying of children, it's about a fancy car. But the desires are always there to cheat, to misbehave, to waste time, to think inappropriately while we engage in study and prayer. And it will not go away. Training, as much training as you do, the training is good about controlling it, but not getting rid of it. The Alter Rebbe I'm sorry. Now I continue the Rebbe's words, page 365. With every repulsion of this thought from his mind, the Sitra Achra, the evil, is suppressed here below, is suppressed here below in this world. And since the arousal from below, in our case, the initiative of the Benoni, is in suppressing the Sitra Achra, produces a corresponding arousing above. Anytime I push away the evil from action, speech, and thought, I'm bringing down God. So God gives me many opportunities to connect them to the universe. The Sitra Achra above, in the supernal worlds, the root of the Sitra Achra of this world, which soars like an eagle, is also suppressed. So every time I remove the evil from controlling, I'm also tying down the source of the evil. Just imagine it's an eagle that soars and tries to scare all around, and you are clipping his wings, that they cannot lift the wings so high just a little bit. Every time I do, it's a little less. Thus, realizing the verse, we can fulfill a verse that the prophet tells us, the prophet Ovadia, though you soar aloft like an eagle, I will yet bring you down from there, says God. God is giving us an opportunity to control that evil eagle and lowering it down, giving the wings less and less space. Indeed, the Zohar in Parshas Truma tells us, extols the divine satisfaction that occurs when the Sitra Achra is subdued here below. So the greater the desire, the greater the evil desire that exists in my heart, the greater the service of God that is achieved. So the more control we have over the Sitra Achra. For thereby God's glory rises above all, more than by any other praise, and this ascent is greater than all else, etc. This is the words of the Zohar, that we have a great opportunity. Thus, it is the evil thoughts which enter the mind of the Benoni that enable him to fulfill God's command in averting his attention from them, thereby subduing the Sitra Achra. Therefore, says the Rebbe, therefore one should not feel depressed or very troubled at heart. He ought to be somewhat troubled by the occurrence of these thoughts, otherwise he may become indifferent to them and will cease to wage war against them. But he ought to be sorely troubled, not to be sorely troubled by them, even if he engages all his days, his entire life, in this conflict with the thoughts which will always enter his mind. Why? Though he may never rise to the level which precludes their occurrences, he should not be depressed. Why? For perhaps this is what he was created for, and this is the service demanded of him, to subdue the Sitra Achra constantly. And therefore, the rabbi now circles back to the first question of Tanya in chapter 1. Remember, Job said, you have created evil. And the rabbi is asking, it's a free choice. How can God create evil people? Says the rabbi, considering this, Job said, to God, you have created wicked men, as though it were preordained that one man be wicked and another righteous. The rabbi is going to go on and explain Remember, Job says you have created wicked, you have created righteous. Ask the Rebbe, God never gives us, God does not make up for us. It's my choice to be whatever I want. When God is going to, the Rabbi is going to explain, when God says, I created evil, God says, I've created the evil inclination in you so that you need to fight it continuously. So you need to prove that you are godly, that you are bringing God down to earth by overcoming those urges. In the first chapter, here is the Rebbe's, the commentator. In the first chapter, the Alter Rebbe pointed out that this is contradicted by the statement of the Gemara that before a child is born, God decrees whether he should be wise or foolish, strong or weak, and so on, but does not determine whether he will be righteous or wicked. This is left to one's choice. The meaning, and how is it possible? Job says God created wicked. God did not create wicked people. We decide if we're going to be wicked or righteous. The meaning of Job's statement becomes clear, however, in light of the above discussion. True, God does not ordain whether men will act wickedly, but he does create wicked men in the sense that their minds work like the mind of a rasha, of a wicked man, with evil thoughts constantly occurring to them. God created them in this way so that they will engage in battle with these thoughts and thereby subjugate the Sitra Achra, as the Alter Rebbe now goes on to say. So God, when Job says you've created wicked, you've created righteous, not created wicked, really wicked people, but created people with wickedness, with the desires, and those desires will never stop. The implication, says the Rebbe, of Job's statement is not that they were created to actually be wicked, God forbid, that is sinful in thought, speech, and action, but that there should occur to them in their thoughts and musings alone that which occurs to the wicked. That is, that evil thoughts should enter the mind as they do in the minds of the wicked, and they shall eternally wage war to avert the minds from them in order to subjugate the Sitra Achra. But yet, they will never be able to annihilate the Sitra Achra in their souls completely, for this is accomplished by a tzaddik, by tzaddikim. So says the Rebbe, to get rid of the evil, impossible. As long as we acknowledge that, we will have desires that are inappropriately. We will fail. We will not do what we promised. We will not do as good as we wanted to. But it's not because we are evil. It's because the evil resides within us and we have the opportunity to control it. A tzaddik subjugates his animal soul to such a degree that it is unable to arouse temptation in his heart. His mind is therefore untroubled by evil thoughts. Those, however, of whom Job said that they were created wicked, cannot rise to this level. It is always possible for evil thoughts to enter their minds. The task is not to give them free rein. Now the Rabbi is going to talk about the pleasure God derives from two categories of people. I started by sharing with you that there are two types of delicacies. There is one sweet and there is one spice. Which one do you prefer, the sweetness or the spicy one?
Which one's healthy, right?
We're not talking about healthy. Which one? Sweet. Why? Let's find out. There are two kinds of divine pleasure. One from the complete annihilation of the Sitra Achra and the conversion of bitter to sweet, of darkness to light, and the other, that is, the former referring to the emotional faculties of the animal soul, and the latter to its mental faculties, which is accomplished by tzaddikim. And the second, when the Sitra Achra is subdued while it is still at its strongest and most powerful, soaring like an eagle, and from this height God topples it in response to human initiative, that is, as a result of one's effort to subduing the Sitra Achra in his soul. This is accomplished by Beinani. I'm going to stop here, just sharing with you a little bit about the future, what the Rabbi is going to talk about. When we enjoy food, there is one kind of tasty that tastes food, that we taste, and that's sweet. The other is spicy. Which one is greater? As we'll see in a moment, we'll find out. But serving God brings God pleasure in both ways. When a tzaddik serves God, it's sweet. There are no hurdles. There is no sharpness. It's not spicy. It's all sweet. It's all lovey-dovey. There is no evil inclination. There is no desire to be disturbed in the middle of prayer. When he is praying, he's actually praying and not traveling across the universe. I think I told you once, a yeshiva boy was praying the Amida prayer, and after he concluded, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Dean, comes to him and says, shook his hand, said, Shalom Aleichem, welcome back. Hello, welcome back. And the man says, what are you talking about? He says, looking at your face, it looks like you just traveled around the globe. You're in China, in Cuba, in Taiwan, in Australia, in the United States, and finally you landed back. Because when you pray, you wonder. A tzaddik can concentrate on the entire prayer without deviation, without losing it, without forgetting where he's holding. Sometimes I turn to people and said, did you say the morning prayer today? Of course, I was in synagogue. No, I'm asking you, did you say Ishtabach? Did you say Baruch She'omar? These are very well known. He says, I don't remember, but I was in synagogue and I said everything what everybody else says, so I assume I did. I turn to people, I says, there are morning blessings, 17 morning blessings. Do you remember if you said the third one, that God, thank you for opening up my eyes? I don't remember, but it just happened an hour ago. How come? They don't, because their mind was elsewhere. This is the way God created us. A tzaddik, when he prays, he has an accounting. He can tell you the exact moment when he prayed and what he said, because that's where his concentration is. This is a sweet delicacy. This is a way of serving God out of sweetness. Just kissing and loving God without any challenge. There's no problem. It's always going well. But then you have the other category. And these are the categories, assuming they do what's right, but it comes with great challenges. They are unable to concentrate on prayer for 2 minutes without their mind already traveling elsewhere. They are unable to deliver on promises and obligations they're supposed to. They are unable to walk the street without thinking, what can I do to enjoy or to bring to or earn or to grab something that's not mine? In order for us to serve God, when we are able to do what's right, we are able to serve God by serving him a spicy meal that is very, very much enjoyed. You know the difference between sweet and spicy? The difference is, and next time we'll elaborate, sweet is very simple. It's the taste that you taste as soon as your taste buds touch the food. Spicy food, the pleasure is where we try to dig deeper and discover the sweetness in it. And the Rabbi is going to talk about that spicy food is the root, is the source of sweetness. And therefore, we enjoy it better than sweet. Because when we discover it, we were digging in deeper into enjoying it. Does everyone agrees with this, or anybody disagree? Huh? No? Everybody agrees? Great. The Rabbi is going to deal with this in details. That's why most of us serve God sharp, spicy, hot food, assuming we serve God. Righteous men are offering God sugar. How much sugar can you eat? Spicy food as much as you can. And that's the difference. So, yeah, you have ulcers, right? That's why you take the pesto, whatever it is. And we will continue next week, God willing. about the two types of service of God, the spicy and the sweet. Thank you so much.